Hi, I'm John Stevenson. We're going to be looking at Isaiah chapter 28, verses 1 through 16 in our continuing study of the Old Testament prophets. Our passage opens, Isaiah 28:1, Woe to the proud crown of the drunkards of Ephraim. Now, Ephraim is one of those tribes of the northern tribes of Israel. So it's north of Judah. Judah is the southern kingdom. Ephraim is one of the leading tribes, really, of the northern kingdom of Israel, just a bit to the north of the city of Jerusalem, which was pretty close to the border. So woe to the proud crown of the drunkards of Ephraim and to the fading flower, and notice that reference because we're going to see that repeated in just a minute, to the fading flower of its glorious beauty. That is, Ephraim was a beautiful place, but it was fading fast, and judgment is coming, and this is going to be a chapter of judgment. Well, there's been a number of chapters of judgment leading up to this, but it's going to start with Ephraim, but it's not going to stay with Ephraim. Notice the verse continues, which is at the head of the fertile valley of those who are overcome with wine. Notice again the reference to wine and drunkenness. Verse 2, Behold, the Lord has a strong and mighty, and translators inserted the word agent, a strong and mighty something. And notice is described as a storm of hail, a tempest of destruction, like a storm of mighty overflowing waters. He has cast it down to the earth with his hands. And this mighty and strong tempest storm, there's a storm coming. And it's shaped like Assyria. Let me just sort of put the spoiler right there. Verse 3, again, you see the reference to drunkenness. The proud crown of the drunkards of Ephraim is trodden underfoot. Assyria is on its way, and they will reach all the way down. In the past, they'd come into the area of Galilee and taken away some of the tribes that were located up there, but now they're coming for Ephraim. Verse 4, and the fading flower, and there it is again, of its glorious beauty, which is at the head of the fertile valley, will be like the first ripe fig prior to summer, which one sees, and as soon as it is in his hand, he swallows it. That is, Ephraim's going to get swallowed up. It's, summer's coming, the heat's coming, the heat is on, and it is coming for Ephraim. Verse 5, in that day, the Lord of hosts will become a beautiful crown. And now notice, this is not talking about a crown that's going to be placed on the head of somebody, but rather the Lord is going to be that beautiful crown, and a glorious diadem. A crown would be this sometimes rather heavy, big metal object, and you've seen pictures of crowns. Some of those haven't changed in 3,000 years. A diadem would be either a ribbon or a band around the head, and would be a little bit lighter, and a king could wear a crown or a diadem. Just it's really two different pictures of what is essentially the same thing. So a crown tends to be heavier, a diadem tends to be lighter, but they still point to royalty. And notice, it's not saying the Lord is going to wear a crown or that he's going to give a crown. Rather, he's going to become the crown and a glorious diadem to the remnant of his people. So this is a picture of God coming, not for Ephraim, but for the remnant of his people. Verse 6, a spirit of justice for him who sits in judgment, a strength to those who repel the onslaught at the gate. And the onslaught has just been described, and it's going to be coming to certain gates. Verse 7, and these also reel with wine. Notice we go back to that drunken issue. These also reel with wine and stagger from strong drink. Who are those that are reeling? Who are those that are staggering? It's the priest and the prophet. And notice the repetition of that term reel. Of course, it's a Hebrew word that's being repeated, but it's been repeated again and again and again. The priest and the prophet. Now, priests were forbidden under the law to drink strong drink and to become drunk when they were officiating. And notice it's the priest and the prophet, and we're going to see what some of the things that the prophets are saying in just a moment. But the point is that the spiritual leadership is in no shape to lead. That they are confused by wine, they stagger from strong drink, they reel while having visions, they totter when rendering judgment. It they're not taking their position seriously. And now we get really gross, verse 8. For all the tables are full of filthy vomit without a single clean place. It's just they are getting worse and worse, and their leadership is just grotesque. Verse 9, now notice our translators, and I think rightfully so, put this in quotes. This is actually something that is coming from these bad leaders, from these drunken priests, these drunken prophets. To whom would he teach knowledge? And to whom would he interpret the message? Sure, let's hear a message. Who's going to get this? From those just weaned from milk, from those just taken from the breast, as if to say, Isaiah, and you people, you're just children when it comes to these things. We understand. And notice verse 10, for he says, order on order, order on order, line on line, line on line, a little here, a little there. It's a little bit like saying, okay, children, line up. We're going to take you for a ride. And it's mockery in this simplicity. It's a mockery of simplicity. And so in verse 11, Isaiah says, indeed, he will speak to this people through stammering lips and a foreign tongue. You've been mocking about the way the prophet speaks. You've been mocking about the way that the people respond. And God says, I'm going to turn your mockery completely around. I'm going to speak. God's going to speak to this people through a stammering lips and a foreign tongue. And of course, when you're hearing a foreigner speak in a language you don't know, it just comes out as all sort of gibberish. It comes out as nothing understandable. It comes out as the sound of a barbarian. That's an interesting word. Our English word barbarian actually comes from a Greek word. Sounds the same way and sort of means the same idea, but they got it because to their ear, the sound of a foreigner speaking was just going bar, 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 and it didn't really mean anything. Now, this passage where he says he's going to speak to this people through stammering lips and a foreign tongue, we're going to see it quoted by the Apostle Paul in the New Testament in 1 Corinthians chapter 14. I want to back up a verse where Paul says, brethren, do not be children in your thinking. Remember, the passage that Paul's going to quote from here in Isaiah is making fun of people for what is perceived as their childishness. Brethren, do not be children in your thinking, yet in evil be infants, but in your thinking be mature. Don't be evil. Don't be grown up evil. Be children, be infants when it comes to doing wrong things. But when it comes to right thinking, grow up. And now he quotes the passage. Here it is. In the law it is written, by men of strange tongues and by the lips of strangers I will speak to this people. And even so, they will not listen to me. God says, look, I'm going to speak to this people through stammering lips and a foreign tongue. And even then, they will not get it. Now, the point that he's making, that Isaiah is making, and Paul is building upon this point. We'll look at where he goes in just a moment. But the point that Isaiah is making is, look, even if you're not listening to my prophets the way they speak, you're making fun of them in their simplicity. You're making fun of them, saying their words don't mean anything at all. So I'm going to send some people your way where their words won't mean anything to you, where their words will be nonsensical to you, and those words will be my hand of judgment. Even so, he says, they will not listen to me. And 1 Corinthians 14:22. Now, here was Paul's, now he's dealing with a slightly different situation. He's dealing with those that were speaking in other languages. They were coming into the church, and instead of speaking good Greek or maybe even good Hebrew, they were speaking other languages. And of course, they were speaking these languages. Was it a supernatural gift? Was it because these are languages they had learned? For whatever reason, they were speaking other languages. And Paul says, no, these other languages, these tongues, are for a sign not to those who believe, but to unbelievers. But prophecy is for a sign to not to unbelievers, but to those who do believe. And so now Paul is saying, look, when you come into the church, speak in a way that can be understood. By contrast with what Isaiah had said back then, God had said, I'm going to send people that don't even speak your languages. And you'll get the message. He's going to send, well, initially he's going to send Assyria, and they speak a different language, and they're going to come in. They're going to do some bad things in the northern kingdom of Israel, and then they're going to come against the southern kingdom of Judah. And we're going to see Jerusalem mentioned in just a moment. So verse 12, he who said to them, here is rest, give rest to the weary, and here is repose. God had said that. He said, look, I can save you. I can give you rest. I can give you repose. I can give you a place to trust in me. But they would not listen. And so, the word of the Lord to them will be, they'd been making fun of this, and God says, okay, you said that what you said in mockery, I'm going to do actually, order on order, order on order, line on line, line on line, a little here, a little there, in order that they may go and stumble backward and be broken, snared, and taken captive. That northern kingdom is Ephraim, and the northern kingdom is going to be taken into captivity. Now, it's interesting because these words have an immediate context. But again, if I can borrow from the Apostle Paul, who pointed to something in his day that had an application, I can be reminded that there came a day when foreign languages showed up in Jerusalem. And of course, the passage is in Acts chapter 2 on the day of Pentecost, where God sent not invaders, but he sent his Spirit to invade and to begin something new there in Jerusalem. Instead of his Spirit coming into the temple, his Spirit came into the hearts of his people. They became the temple. And to manifest that, he gave them languages. He gave them a supernatural speaking that took place. And then he followed it up with some teaching, order on order, order on order, line on line, line on line, a little here, a little there. In fact, we have an entire New Testament of instruction and order on order and line on line and a little here and a little there. That was a sign saying, if you do not believe, and just like they saw judgment back there in Isaiah's day, judgment is coming to you who do not believe as well. And it did. In the year 70 AD, judgment again came against Jerusalem. By the way, I don't think we can just put this in the past and say, well, that's nice for I think it applies to us as well. You say, what kind of judgment are we facing? Well, I don't know, but I know that when the Lord comes, there will be a final judgment. And the message is the same. Listen to him. Listen to his instructions, and he has spoken it in a variety of languages. Here I am speaking English. That wasn't even a language back in biblical times. And that message has gone out in all sorts of languages today. Verse 14, therefore, hear the word of the Lord, O scoffers, and this is why I think that they had been scoffing earlier, who rule this people who are in, and notice, Jerusalem. This isn't just limited to the northern kingdom. In fact, this chapter actually changes gears. From now on, we'll be talking not about the northern kingdom, but about the southern kingdom, and specifically Jerusalem, who ruled this people who were in Jerusalem. Verse 15, because you have said, we have made a covenant with death. And notice those languages. Or those words. When he says, we've made a covenant with death, in other words, we've tried to outsmart that coming judgment. And of course, the coming judgment, the initial coming judgment back in Isaiah's day, was the Assyrians who were coming down. And sure enough, the people of Judah had tried to buy off the Assyrians. They made a deal with the Assyrians. They said, look, if you will just go away here, we're going to strip the gold and silver out of the temple and we'll give it to you and just be on your way. Notice a covenant with death, and with Sheol we have made a pact. And so notice how those terms, a covenant is a pact, and death and Sheol are describing the same things. And God says, that's not going to work. That's been your plan. The overwhelming scourge will not reach us when it passes by, for we have made falsehood our refuge, and we have concealed ourselves with deception. Notice falsehood and deception are the tools of their trade. And they've been pinning their hopes upon their covenant with death, upon their pact with Sheol, upon finding refuge in falsehood and concealment through deception. And it will not work. Now, the good news is that we have one who has come and kept the covenant that we could not keep. Indeed, he died the death that our broken covenant deserved. Who himself went to the grave, who himself went to Sheol, and yet did not stay there. His soul was not abandoned to Sheol, but instead he rose again from the dead, and who did not engage in falsehood or deception, but in truth becomes our refuge and even our place of concealment. And so we come to verse 16, therefore, says the Lord God, behold, I am laying in Zion. Remember, Zion was the mountain on which the temple was, but he's going to bring something better than the temple. I'm laying in Zion a stone, and not just a stone, a tested stone, one that has been tested by fire, one that has been tested and found pure and right, a costly cornerstone for the foundation firmly placed. That is, God says, I'm going to build something. I'm going to build something magnificent. On that which is tested and has passed the test, on that which is the most precious thing of all, the costly cornerstone. And he who believes will not be disturbed. When we come to Christ in faith, we find that place of salvation. Now, when he speaks here of a cornerstone, you have to understand that there had been something written earlier in the Bible. We're on Isaiah's day reading this, but back in David's day, David had written a psalm, one of the many psalms of David, Psalm 118, verse 22, the stone which the builders rejected has become the chief cornerstone. So here Isaiah is adding to that prophecy and pointing out that there was something that had been rejected, but it would be oh so costly. Oh, so precious. Oh, so strong in passing the test that was set before it. The test of the cross. Because that was the rejection that he endured. And yet, by passing the test, by going to the cross, the death, the burial, and by rising from the dead, he now becomes the chief cornerstone, our tested stone, the stone on which we build our faith.